Greetings, Patriots. I'm Perry Green, and this is God in America. I recently had the opportunity to listen to Oklahoma State Representative Jim Shaw at a recent Lions Den meeting in Yukon, Oklahoma. I'm very impressed with Representative Shaw and some of the things he had to say and wanted to share those with you today. We're really battling a corrupt government on so many levels, and Jim Shaw has been exposing some of that corruption. So I hope you will appreciate some of the things he has to say. As always, I thank you for watching our podcast and being with us, and I encourage you to keep the light burning.
Thank you so much, and thank you guys for being here tonight. You know, what I'd like to do tonight is just kind of step through a little bit about my personal background, just a little bit, and then why I'm here, some of the fights that we're having at the Capitol, maybe a little bit more about some of the shenanigans like the flyer talked about. And we're going to peel the curtain back a little bit on some of that, and then talk about maybe what we can do going forward. So a little bit more about me. I grew up actually not very far from here. I went to Putnam City School District and then graduated, went to OSU in Stillwater. That's where I met my wife. We graduated and got married, moved to the city, worked for Chesapeake Energy for a number of years. I ran a team there. We dealt with basically every possible way that Chesapeake Energy could monetize an asset. My team kind of helped prepare schedules and data. And so it was a lot of systems and dealing with data and schedules for either asset sales or joint ventures or credit and hedge facility agreements with banks and what have you. Because in the early years, Aubrey McClendon, they bought as much as they can as fast as they could. And then at some point, the tide kind of flipped and they tried to figure out how to get rid of a lot of assets. So, but that was a fantastic place to work for. I absolutely loved working at Chesapeake and grew up there. I interned there all through college and then obviously hired on out of school. But I got to a point where I was really hungry for something else. I'd been recruited by an oil company out of Houston, very seriously entertained moving to Houston. Dana and I went down there for a couple of days and did the realtor thing and all of that. And all but had decided to take the job, and we woke up the next morning in the hotel room and we were like, we can't do that. We cannot move to Houston. Praise God for people that live there and what have you, but that was not for us. But I ended up reconnecting with a former VP of mine who had started his own consulting firm. So this was around 2012. And I was kind of inquiring with him like, hey, what are you up to? What are you doing? And what he did was really kind of consulting and providing advice to oil and gas companies based on his experience in-house and kind of what I was used to. So it was a really good fit, and I ended up joining up with him. And fast forward, we ended up developing a software program primarily for the land departments within oil and gas companies. And so we became a software and services company, did that for about 10 years, was a lot of fun, a lot of hard work, a lot of travel and time away from home and what have you, especially when my girls were even young. My girls are 10 and almost 8. And so this was kind of the early years with having kids, and was still a meaningful experience going through kind of co-owning the business and growing it from a handful of contractors to a little over 100 employees, and sold that business about 3 years ago. Fast forward, I stayed on with the buyer for a couple of years to kind of help transition the business and everything else. This time last year, really kind of at the beginning of last year, I knew I was ready for a change. Everything had shifted over to the new leadership. It was in a good spot, and I was kind of ready to kind of close the chapter on that and move on to the next thing. And I was very selfish, thinking I'll step away and kind of go back to doing some consulting work like we were doing in the early days, maybe spend a little more time at home, maybe dictate and kind of be in control of my own schedule, and had all these beautiful thoughts in my mind. And the Lord said, no, you are not going to do that. And you're going to go right into something else where you're going to have this perception that you're in control, but you are not going to be at all. And it was such a blessing. But getting into politics was not even remotely close to being on my radar. I mean, Dan and I obviously were very aware of things going on politically, and especially during COVID and post-COVID, everybody kind of woke up, a little bit and figured out how much our government can disrupt our day-to-day lives. And we're still feeling that like we've never felt it before. But getting in the fray was really not even something that I had considered. And so part of the intro, and a lot of people know this about my part of the story, is I got into running for state representative last year because there was an industrial wind complex that was being proposed about 2 miles from my home and property that Dan and I have spent a lot of time, a lot of treasure and resource and what have you developing and really wanting that to, Lord willing, be a generational farm and ranch for our girls one day. When they grow up, hopefully they don't go too far from home, build their own home on the place or what have you. That's what we desire. Whatever the Lord's desire is what it'll be. But that's our desire. And so when that was threatened by something the size and scale and ridiculousness that is this green energy scam agenda and that industrial wind complex, and I knew that the incumbent at the time didn't really care about it, that's when I stepped in. And so fast track through the campaign, which has the unfortunate distinction of being the most expensive House race in state history, not at all the badge of honor that I was hoping for through that process, not even a little bit. I do hope, though, that I selfishly retain that title for a while, because I hope nobody has to go through that process. And present company is saying, yes, I'll keep that for you. But in all seriousness, I hope nobody has to go through that kind of a campaign at that level. So, I got into the race, and a big topic obviously was green energy and some of the other items that Chris talked about, but there's a whole lot of other things going on at the Capitol, a whole lot. And we're going to go through some of that, but I do think the green agenda, the Green New Deal, is one of the biggest fights of our lifetime. They're trying to control as much land as they can. They're trying to control the food production because they're controlling the land, and they're trying to control the energy source and the energy market. If you control all three of those things, the next thing after that you can control very easily is the people, right? And so it's a very serious issue. But despite that, there were other items that were at the forefront for me and people out in District 32 that, I continued to fight and prepare legislation for throughout the session and all that. But I want to kind of spend a little bit of time talking about the immense lack of transparency and accountability in that place. I mean, Justin talked about the Corporation Commission, and that is absolutely true. What we're dealing with at the state level in the House and in the Senate, complete black hole. And, we elect people, they get down there and they just fall into this abyss where you have no idea what's to you. They're not telling you what's happening and when it's happening and why it's happening. And that was a huge commitment for me to my constituents was, if you elect me, I promise you, your priorities come first. I promise you, I'm the good, the bad, the ugly, and all of it as often as I can, and you're going to know exactly what's going on. And so I tried to start off session with a very basic rule amendment. How many people know the House Senate have rules, and that really kind of governs our day-to-day and how we behave and what happens? That's how that place actually operates. And so very briefly, the amendment that I tried to file, when we cast our vote on the floor or even in committee, there are some of those times that we push that button that it's not recorded in the journal for you all to be able to go and see how we voted on something, primarily amendments to bills and things like that. A lot of the times amendments can be a really good thing or a really bad thing, and it would be important for you all to know how your legislator votes on certain things, right? When it's not defaulted to be recorded in the rules today, I have to stand up and say, I want this upcoming vote recorded. And I have to have 6 friends stand up with me and say, we agree with him that we want it recorded. I don't need 6 friends on the floor to tell somebody up at the chair that I need something recorded. I've got 40,000 people back home and multiple thousands of people that voted me into the seat. I don't need 6 other friends to tell me that I want something recorded. So my rule then was basically this: if I feel like something's important enough for me and my people back home for it to be recorded, I should be the only one. It should only take one person, right? You talk about, and that was the very first day, organizational day. This is our first day on the floor, the first time we're going to hit the green or red button for stuff. And you would have thought that I set off like a nuclear warhead in that building. Like, it got nasty really quick and was just really revealing on the overall temperament inside the Capitol of, we don't like transparency. We like to hide as much as we can. And if something can go unnoticed or not on the record, that's how we really want it. We don't want to have that kind of transparency, right? I mean, that just kind of kicked everything off for me, and it all got maybe a little more interesting after that. But honestly, for me, I go to work every day at 23rd and Lincoln. I was voted into that place to do a job. So when I do these things and I call things out, whether I call certain legislators out individually or I call an issue out, it's just balls and strikes for me. I don't care who it is. I don't care what the topic is. It's just balls and strikes. Now, I've taken some criticism for that from other legislators who take offense to being, truth actually being spoken and revealed. But it's just balls and strikes. And so, something with the accountability side too, and I'm going to transition into the budget, which is a huge issue across our state. I kept hearing about, but when we get into the latter part of session, we start talking about budget and the $12+ billion that we're going to put to work in the state. And that's when leadership starts talking about, okay, well, now we're getting to the part of session where the horse trading starts to happen and the negotiations start to happen. And, this bill is going to get killed over here because we're going to get this one, we're going to do that over here. But the term horse trading was a little more frequent than I even kind of expected, right? And to me, that's really disgusting to say that a bill that could have been a constituent request or a constituent-led piece of legislation is going to get horse traded or thrown in the trash because somebody else has a different agenda or a bigger agenda, or it's the leadership's agenda. And so that is really a disgusting practice that happens a lot. But the process for the budget, if we talk about the budget, just fundamentally, this is your taxpayer dollars at work, right? Which way more dollars are at work than they should be. And that's a massive conversation that was tried to be had this year with some of the income tax reduction, that the path to zero and all that. And that's great. It's way overdue. It's really not strong enough. It could be a lot stronger. But the budget itself, I had another new member explain this to me the other day. They were like, it's completely backwards. We start off session creating legislation that could potentially cost tens to hundreds of millions of dollars. And then at the end of session, we then figure out how we wrap a budget around all the junk that we just created to pass through. We should be starting session with how much money do we actually have to work with, and then make sure our legislation fits within the scope and parameters of the total dollars that we have to play with your money. So, but it's completely backwards. Also, we closed out session with some pretty controversial, I don't think it was controversial, but some pretty high profile issues that related largely to budget. How many of y'all agree that non-disclosure agreements for publicly elected officials should be illegal? That's my opinion, at least. You've got a joint committee at the Capitol between the House and Senate with leadership and everything else. I believe, and I've been told that potentially that aluminum smelter plant, and that's going in the Port of Inola, they potentially knew about that 12 to 18 months or even longer. Yet the rest of the state and the rest of us in the legislature found out about it 2 weeks before session was out, 3 weeks. And then we're trying to digest what all is happening. And is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And then all of a sudden, everybody's pushing the red or green button for $255 million of legislatively approved dollars to go to that, not including the other $500 million to $750 million more dollars in incentives and everything else that they're getting. But those guys knew about that for a long, long time. And a lot of them openly admit that they're on that committee and that they're under NDA, and they can't tell you who the company is or what it's really about, but there is a big project coming. That's not a pure representative form of government, right? It's just not. State agencies. Let's shift gears a little bit. How many of y'all know our state agencies, virtually every single one of them operate like a for-profit business? It's your tax dollars at work that they exist. That's the only way that they exist. Yet they continue to operate like I would have operated my business, which is grow, create as much profit margin as you can, what have you. Their whole agenda is to create more programs, create more services, grow, more headcount, what have you. It was very largely known that we were going into session with a budget deficit. We were not going to have as much tax revenue coming in as what we were expected to go outgoing based on prior spend and all that. Yet virtually every single agency came to the table and said, we need more money. We need more. We're going into a deficit, but we need more. I think there were only two on the A and B subcommittee that I was on that said, I will just go flat. I commend you for doing that, but I think we should still be looking at, can we take some cuts every once in a while? Not a very popular opinion. And I would argue a lot of the services and programs that our state agencies offer, and probably even some of the agencies themselves entirely, don't even deserve to exist. Your tax dollars are going into areas that are not even for the true fundamental core purpose of government and what government's installed to do. It's not, which is a whole other issue in and of itself. Let's get dicey for a second. The overall behavior inside the chambers, the House and Senate chambers. So President Company can confirm my seat position on the floor is right next to the Democrats. Purposeful, I'm sure, but entertaining nonetheless. I mean, they gave me a really good seat to some fireworks and some interesting conversation, but literally I'm right across the aisle from Minority Leader Cindy Munson. So a lot of activity going on, a lot of conversations, and you assume that Republican leadership would cut deals with Democrats occasionally for whatever reason. You assume it happens, right? So everybody here assume Republican leadership is going to cut deals with Democrats every single day. I saw it every single day. They're going over here or they're coming over there, and there's conversations of, well, they're going to give us this if we do this, and if we vote this way on this one, then they'll do this, and yada, yada, yada. It was disgusting. And I saw it happen every single day. Other behavior inside the chamber, we had a wind turbine setback bill. Probably the number one priority for me going into session. We didn't get anything accomplished, by the way, green energy related, wind or solar, except for light mitigation on wind turbines. But we had some legislation that we had kind of massaged and gotten to the point where it passed the House with 2/3 majority vote. Passed the House, went over and died in the Senate. Senate sends us a bill that's super weak. It was very bad. So we take that bill and basically change it to reflect the vast majority of the language that we had overwhelmingly passed a month or two prior. Well, when we vote on that bill again, basically the same language failed. We go from 2/3, meaning we had right at 68 votes in favor of this bill, to 45 in favor of the bill, or something like that. It's a huge drop. I think over 20 people changed the vote. So I start walking around the chamber and I catch one of them. I was like, why did you change your vote? It's the exact same language, like pretty much the exact same language over here. And he was like, oh, shoot. He's like, I didn't care about that vote before. He's like, I knew the Senate was going to kill it. So we just vote however we want for perception, for an outward, this perception of, hey, I voted conservatively over here, but even though it died over here, I voted conservatively. So that gives me a thumbs up for a campaign mailer, right? Which we're all getting a lot of mailers already, which is awesome. But that was proven time and time again, where you see people flip votes. We saw it with Senate Bill 224, which was super. Everybody knew about that, and the data system for kids' data in school, and the flip-flopping there, both our side and the Senate, was just ridiculous. But that flip-flopping, I don't let your yay be yay and your nay be nay, right? Multiple occasions where members on the floor were intoxicated during session. Yeah. So I'll get to the Senate example here in a minute. The House side, I think it was a couple weeks before session was let out. A lot of the times when we're going late, like on deadline week, I only had 2 deadline weeks. I'm first year, right? So this is all somewhat new, but deadline week, it's like, hey, we can be here as long as it takes to get stuff done. Makes sense. It's deadline week. Got to get stuff done. A lot of the times we would just blow right through dinner, keep going, stay on the floor. They'd order food. People would go out and get food and come back on the floor. We'd just keep going. Well, for whatever reason, one night we broke for dinner for like an hour and a half. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, you give some of these people some time to leave and then come back, it's going to get a little chaotic. They come back and I sit down and I start looking around. I'm like, and I'm counting, and I finally lost. I was just like, forget it. I'm not going to count. There were so many people on the House floor that were inebriated. Very clearly, the way that they were talking, the way they were acting, the volume in their voice, it was extremely clear. Fast forward to the very last day of session, a couple Thursdays ago. How many watched kind of what happened in the Senate? Yes, yeah, you lived it. It was fun. Not in the Senate. Yeah. So there was a bill that right now, so on that Thursday, this literally should have been the last day of session. House came back on Friday. This is when, Stitt provided probably more vetoes this year than he ever has, and potentially in the last 30 years of any governor vetoing that number of bills. So he vetoed a bunch. So we start taking up certain bills for overriding veto. The very first bill that we took up on the House side was a Representative Chris Kennedy bill. It's highly controversial earlier in session when he presented it. It had to do with National Guard and certain things that a lot of people had some heartburn about, myself included. But I think they ended up wrapping a lot of the military budget into that bill as well. So it was a very, very important bill for certain people in the building. So you go to vote. That's the very first one that we take up. I voted no to eventually sustain a veto. I didn't like the bill to begin with. It passed overwhelmingly. We go through the rest of them. The Senate's going through theirs. And then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we switch. So we send all of the ones that we override to them, and they send them to us. Well, we get theirs. I think they gave us about 18. We gave them about 25, 30, something like that. Well, House leadership and Kennedy go to the Senate and say, guess what? We're not hearing any of yours that you just sent to us. We're going to hold them hostage until you pass this one from Kennedy, okay? So that's issue number one. Issue number two is at 2:30 p.m., the House starts standing at ease, which means we're not in official recess. We're not hey, we'll come back in a couple hours, standing at ease from 2:30 in the afternoon until 9:30 that evening. So at 2 o'clock over there on the Senate side, they start hearing this, not the big beautiful bill, in my mind is the big nasty bill from Kennedy. Okay. And so they start hearing it. They open the vote on the Senate floor at 4 o'clock, somewhere around 4 o'clock. So this is when they're saying, okay, senators, press the green or red button and let's move on. That vote stayed open from 4 o'clock until 9:15. Okay. We've done some shenanigans on the House side where they keep votes open for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes long, which if you open a vote and everybody's in there and all they have to do is push a button or maybe see how their friend's going to vote and push the same button, it doesn't take that long. We're talking a couple minutes. This was 5 hours. During the 5 hours, this is when senators start leaving the chamber and coming back in. There's meetings happening in this conference room. There's tons of rumors and confirmed conversations that are happening of leadership saying, we'll give you whatever you want if you flip your vote. Because at that point, when they open the vote, to override a veto on the Senate side, you have to have 32 votes. They had 30. They were 2 votes shy. The conservatives on the Senate side were blocking it and doing a really good job. And they stayed firm basically the whole time. But now the horse trading starts and the deals and whatever you want. And so they got to somebody, I can't remember who flipped first, got up to 31. Thank you. I thought somebody flipped first and he went second because he got jealous. Nice went first and then Murdoch. That's right. That's right. Nikki Nice flipped first. They got to 31 and then Murdoch's like, well, hey, I want a good deal too. He flipped the other way, went back to 30. So there was kind of this, toying back and forth that they were doing, but eventually they got it to 32. But again, it took 5 hours. And so I never saw, and we voted on hundreds of bills. We voted on Senate Bill 224 like 6 times. We voted hundreds upon hundreds of times. I never once saw any of that kind of urgency and determination on any of our priorities. Not one time. It's all their agenda and their priorities. So why, I'm gonna start to wrap up here. Why are we in the position that we're in? I think it's the old adage of hard times create strong men, good times, weak men, hard times. We've been in a very long period of hard times, predominantly because we got a lot of weak men that are in positions of power. Whether that's leadership at the Capitol, whether it's a committee chair over here, whether it's private business, you're the CEO or board of directors, we've got predominantly weak men. No, I'm not getting ladies off the hook entirely, but predominantly weak men, they don't do the hard thing. Being in leadership is hard. Being a leader of anything, your home, your business, whatever it is, it's not easy. They don't know how to do the hard thing. They refuse to do it. And simply saying what's true is incredibly difficult for people at 23rd and Lincoln, most of the time, present company excluded. But I think we got here because people got really complacent and comfortable and either unwilling to get engaged or they're too busy working 2 jobs just to make ends meet because a dollar doesn't go as far today as it did even 5 years ago. And, I admit, and I've said it 1,000 times, it took the potential of a 100 wind turbine complex being 2 miles from my house for me to jump in. But I jumped in and I'm still fighting like my life depends on it because I truly believe my way of life, because of not just the green energy agenda, but the tax issues, the budget in our state, everything else is putting at risk the livelihood of my family and my children and my future grandchildren. But we saw a ton of changes this year. And if there's one thing that I realized from every single fight in the session this year, it's that the grassroots Republicans are like a sleeping giant, which is a good thing if you think about it. I'll get to the good part, but a huge part of the political atmosphere that we have in our state right now is because so many Republicans, even many of those that vote in primaries, are disengaged in really what's going on. And they have been for a long time. But what I saw this year, which is really cool, what I saw this year is that if that hornet's nest gets nudged even just a little bit and the politicians at the Capitol get like 50 calls in a day, they lose their minds. And it's beautiful to watch. It really is. I mean, I would get text messages or phone calls. I got it multiple times. Saturday morning, I'm out working on the place, working the cattle, doing something, and I get a text message from a colleague. Would you please get your people off my back? Or would you please get your people off my people so my people will get off my back? And I'm like, no. See, here's the thing. For me, District 32 comes first, right? Their priorities, their needs, their wants come first, 1,000%. But when I push that green or red button, that affects policy for the whole state. So if my people are taking issue with a bill that you're either for or against, and it runs counter to what their beliefs are and what their needs are and what their wants are, game on. I'm running out of time. Game on. Get ready for the phone calls. I got tons of phone calls and emails from people all over the state. A lot of the times from some crazy Democrats in some of the big cities. But hey, I mean, I got a lot of phone calls from other people because I was going to vote on something in committee or on the floor that they were passionate about. And that's great. So no, I did not tell my people to back off. Yes, absolutely. So in closing, nothing is going to change down there unless we change it. And that's why groups like this, the Lions Den. So the Lions Den in Edmond did amazing work for me twice in my campaign. They stuffed, Ashley knows, stuffed envelopes, sent out 2 different letters for me, was critical to getting some messaging out in the snail mail where it reached other people that aren't on social media as much or maybe didn't get the mailers and things like that, was so critical. So the activism and the involvement that you guys have in what you produce is so needed. And so that's why I'm making it my personal mission to join with you all in whatever you're doing so we can wake that sleeping giant, even if it's just a little bit at a time, because it has a huge impact. And even in my first year, I saw it. So God bless you all. Thank you so much for giving me some time tonight. Love to take any questions, but yes, sir. Thank you guys very much. Not today specifically, but I saw the article. I haven't read it thoroughly yet, but it was defending the wind industry coming into Oklahoma and how much tax revenue and things like that it's generating. It's a bunch of baloney. It really is. And every single time you're going to hear, well, it goes to the schools. It goes to the schools. They fight it. They work on abatements every time. They file for abatements. They try to get out of it every single time. But for the schools, and I'm not saying these are unimportant things, but if you get a new football field, great. If you get a new gymnasium, great. How are your test scores doing? How are we benefiting the actual education of the kids? Let's look at that as an actual metric, and then we can start having a conversation. It's not there, by the way. Yes, sir. Yeah, I'm totally fine being by myself, on more times than not. But, quite frankly, I'll work with anybody. I really don't care who it is. And I told that to multiple people there. Even some of the bills that kept getting rejected on getting hearings. I'm like, what would you change it in? I'm not saying I'm going to agree to anything that you want to throw my way, but let's have a conversation. Conversation wasn't had, but there was some conversations that I got in and some tables that I got to talk to some people, and I felt like I gained some respect through some of those conversations, which was great. But I really don't care who it is, what their belief system is, what their worldview is, what their agenda is. I'll go to work and I'll work with anybody. I'll never compromise on my morals, my ethics, and my beliefs, and what my people back home want. Never compromise on that, but I'll sit across the table and work for anybody. And I think that has revealed itself a little bit as session went on, but my primary motivation on relationships is with my Lord and Savior, with my family, and with my people back home. Yes, sir.
So good to have you. And I was able to knock for you a little bit.
Amen.
The southwest part of your district.
Oh, God bless you. That's
northeast side of Harrow there.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So just so glad we got you in there.
Amen.
Can you share a little bit about Senator Pugh being put on the plane city so that he get that 30-second vote?
So my understanding was Senator Pugh, so this was on that chaos of that Thursday where they held the vote open for 5 hours. My understanding was he was already scheduled to fly back. I don't think it was a special trip to get him back. I could be misunderstood or mistaken there, but his flight wasn't supposed to land until 11:30. They were prepared to hold the vote open until midnight to get him back if they needed to, because they knew they were going to get at least one through him to get it across the finish line. Ultimately, they didn't need his vote. They made enough good sweetheart back room, smoke-filled room deals to get it done. So, but yeah, my understanding is that was not an unscheduled trip at their request. It was scheduled that they were ready to wait if they needed to. Yes, ma'am. So yeah, we're in the Lord's house. I'll use a saying that my wife's grandpa used to always say: if you got to talk about your business, you don't have much business to talk about. So if you have to affirm that, to me, that says something, right? Now there's a fine line there sometimes, but I think it's extremely widely well known that there were conversations and there were deals to the tune of what I don't know for sure, but I have no doubt in my mind that they were striking deals for sure. Oh yeah. Yeah, no, they were there. I walked through the rotunda at one point and somebody said, wow, even all the lobbyists went home. And one of them walked by and said, nope, we're still here. That was like, 7 or 8 o'clock. But that, I kind of mentioned the example of us having the intoxicated folks on the house side that night, and that 5-hour window that they held that open, and guys going in and out. The conversation you're talking about, some of the debate and things that happened after that long vote, go back and watch that. A lot of them on the Senate floor were showing very, very strong signs of being intoxicated. And that's an obvious, significant violation of rules in both chambers. And I believe leadership was made aware of it, and they just didn't care. I mean, they didn't need to be made aware of it. They saw it themselves. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Good question. So yeah, I do have a plethora of bills to go back and pull back, every single one of them. I will likely, some of the core guts to those bills are going to stay the same. There may be a little bit of twisting everything can always be improved, right? And I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an attorney, I don't draft these myself. I have dealt with a lot of attorneys in my professional life, but there's always room for improvement, especially, we never pass a short-sighted bill in the state, right? That ultimately does more harm than good. That never happens. So yeah, I'll be working on them to try to improve them a little bit, but for the most part, they'll predominantly stay the same. I will evaluate if there's something there that, if there's another member that wants to take one of those up, if there's something else that my people come to me in the interim and say, hey, we're passionate about this issue now for whatever reason, bring it on. We'll see if we can, because we do have a limit on bills on the House side. But yeah, no, I'll definitely be revisiting most of those. They'll fly right through. Hey, and so story time. I had a bill that would have increased the remittance tax on basically illegal aliens trying to send money back home, using Western Union style, transfers back home. And so I was like, hey, 3 main things we want to keep illegals out of Oklahoma. Don't let them drive, don't let them work, and don't let them send money back home if they figure out how to do the first 2. And so I was like, hey, let's increase the fee on that. That'd be great. If you happen to be a legitimate citizen of the state and you use one of those money transfer services, you can write it off on your taxes and get a credit back on your taxes, right? So we're not going to ultimately penalize you for that. That bill was not heard, but surprisingly, I was reviewing bills one day for the floor. A couple of days later, or the night before floor, I found my exact language in another bill with somebody that happened to be in leadership. And I was like, wow. And I'm telling you, it was word for word, like the exact same. And so that bill was originally something totally different, gutted, replaced with my language, and then presented on the floor with a slight amendment and I'll give them credit, a slight amendment to actually make it better. But I stood up and asked a question on the floor. I was like, hey, would you believe that I think this bill is great? And there's just like, yeah. So I should have. It actually passed the House, didn't get heard in the Senate. No surprise. But all of that to say, if the policy wins, we win. I don't care about my name being on the bill. I really don't. If the policy wins, we win. But I don't really want to give them the satisfaction of just giving it to them. They can come and take it if they want it. Yes, sir. I liked it too, and I voted for it. I will tell you, I think there's some significant, so behind the meter, for those of you that don't know, this was a bill that was passed that says any business, if they want to be on the public utility grid, OG&E, whatever, and get their energy that way, and that's how they pay their utility rates, game on, that's how it normally works. But if you want to provide your own power generation and power your place of business on your own and not get on the public utility grid, then game on, do it yourself. And so that's behind the meter being where the public utility kicks in. You're behind the meter, you're providing your own power. A lot of that seems to be like less regulation, more power to the business and the person, and all that sounds good. There was a caveat in the bill too of, if you're going to do that, there has to be a natural gas component to your power generation, which also is very pro natural gas, Oklahoma. So all those things were really good. My biggest concern with it now is that it does open the door for these businesses, predominantly large scale businesses, could be the data centers where the power draw is huge, whatever it may be, for them to go and buy up a couple thousand acres and put a bunch of solar panels or wind turbines to do a lot of that power generation behind the scenes with just enough natural gas to fit the criteria of the bill. So that was not like an after the fact thought. I had that thought going into it. Ultimately, the pros kind of outweighed the cons, and that's why I pushed the green button. But I do have a significant concern with that. Yeah. That and being off the grid is not in and of itself a bad thing. Off the radar, yeah, I hear you there. And giving kind of a unregulated, unopposed rush towards industrial wind and solar to kind of fly behind as being that main power generation is a concern, 1000%. Thank you guys very much.